Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the epic narrative.
And we're off on another epic narrative. And thank you so much for coming. We started the book of Ruth last week. And as always, it is a pleasure to be here with you. And hopefully we discover some new things. But like I said, Ruth has been tore up for years. It's a great story. Everybody loves a love story. And it is that at its core. And let's just jump right in. Verse 6. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughter-in-laws prepared to return home from there. With her two daughter-in-laws, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said, okay, we'll stop there. So when Naomi heard, this was probably about at least a year, because it would have involved the full season of crops that had been harvested. And of course, this is all God. He had decided to no longer punish his people, but come to the aid of his people. Now, do I think God's goodness is in the harvest? Absolutely. Do I think he caused the famine? No. But we kind of touched on that last week. I don't think God manipulates weather to teach people lessons. He's not going to go after innocent people. But like I said, there was plenty of stuff going on at this time of the writing and in the land of the promised land during the time of the judges. There was enough stuff going on that the enemy had plenty of avenues to cause this kind of reaping of what they had sown. So God's goodness shows up and a full harvest is seen. And then it says, she and her daughter-in-laws prepared to return home from there, which probably means they were preparing to go in a year for the next harvest, because there was nothing to do at that point. She was there in Moab, living life, getting by, figuring life out with three widows, figuring life out together, worshiping Yahweh. Strangers, she was a stranger in the land, although she'd been there for 10 years. That's a long time. And her daughter-in-laws were well connected within the Moabite region. So I'm sure that there were plenty of people who knew Ruth and liked Ruth, and they probably were fairly well provided for just because of people's kindness. But we don't know for sure. But most of the people I read believe that she prepared for about a year, getting ready to show up for the next harvest. Because if she had left immediately, then she wouldn't have arrived during the time of harvest, and so the rest of the story, the timing of it would be off. So just keep that in mind. I could be wrong. It's fine if I'm wrong. Feel free to write me. Let's see. The daughters-in-law prepare as well. So these conversations around dinner time, I would imagine. I don't know what they did during the day. They weren't preparing meals for their husbands. I don't know what work their husbands did. So I'm guessing that maybe they sold stuff at the market. Maybe they harvested for friends. Maybe they worked in businesses that family members owned out of charity. They got jobs. I don't know. All that stuff is possible, and definitely could be happening. So they get together, they start talking, and Naomi's like, I think I'm going to go back to Judah. It's my people. The famine's over. They've had a good harvest. The merchants are talking about it. The traders are talking about it. Everything's returning back to normal. The famine was the reason we left. My relatives are there. The laws of God should be helpful to me in surviving. So I'm going to go. And the daughters-in-law were like, well, we're going with you. We're going with you. Orpah and Ruth were like, absolutely. Yeah, no, we'll all go. Now, I don't know how serious Ruth thought that was, but they were serious about it. And so I'm now it may not, about a year later, with her two daughters, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. So they put this together, and I know for some it's like, no, like she packed up that day, the day she heard that there was going to be a big harvest, she left before, to get there before the harvest came in. That could be true. That could be true. She could have heard that the that the food was there, and maybe the first round of harvesting had occurred. The corn was in, and everything was abundant. That totally could have happened. And maybe she did pack up and leave in a week. Again, I'm not going to argue with you. It's fine with me either way. Either way, the daughters-in-law prepare to go for the trip. Orpah and Ruth, they had given up influence and possible wealth to marry Jewish men. And they gave up the influence that they could have had, especially Ruth, if she was connected to royalty within the royal line. And Ruth is said to have rejected the idols of Moab because they were cruel and unpredictable, which I find interesting because at some level, that's the way God is presented through most of the Old Testament. Unpredictable, at least. Not always cruel. Sometimes he's presented as amazingly good and overwhelming in his blessing and favor, but then he loses his mind and will wipe out entire nations. So it's fascinating. But we do the same thing in, quote, Christianity, evangelical Christianity. We present God as this good, amazing Savior who loves the whole world and died for it. And then we say, but, you reject him. You may never get another chance. And you'll burn in hell forever. Darkness totally annihilating your body over and over and over again as it's regenerated over and over again, and your constant state of falling and heat and torture. And I mean, we go on, and then we say, but God is so loving and kind and good that you really shouldn't reject him because of what it's bizarre. So we present God the same. We can not we. I mean, I do. I poke fun at the way the Old Testament presents God as this bipolar, schizophrenic, all-powerful being, but we do. I've done the same. Not in the last 5 years. Definitely, probably not in the last 10 years. But we have to be careful because we can do the same thing. But it's said that's why she left the royal line. Why she was attracted to a Jewish man was because he faithfully connected to a God who was faithful, who was all powerful, who was not unpredictable or cruel. Because if you obeyed the rules, you kept him happy. So they both prepared with Naomi for the trip. I imagine that meant some clothes, bags. I don't know what else. Food. It was, I think, about a 10-day journey. And they all start walking together. Verse 7. With her two daughters, she left the place where they had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown your kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant each of you that you will find rest in the home of another husband." And then she kissed them goodbye, and they all wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there were still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight," and then gave birth to two sons, "would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, 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 my daughter. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand is turned against me." All right, we'll get into that in a minute. So they start walking together. Now, we covered this. Oh, I don't know what's the. I think it was season 2, but it was a very common cultural thing for you to walk with somebody as a sign of honor. And sometimes you would travel a full day, spend the night, have dinner, spend the night, and then in the morning you would separate, just to show everyone back at home how much you honor the guest that was with you and how deeply you value hospitality. So Naomi wouldn't have been surprised by them preparing to leave with her. She would have figured that they were probably going to walk with her for a little while. The fact that they had supplies to spend the night probably didn't surprise her either. So when Naomi turned to release them, this was not a big oh, I've decided I've got to release them because I'm not going to let them come with me. She probably thought, somewhere along the line, I'm going to say goodbye to them. But until then, we kind of delay saying goodbye. This is going to mean a lot. This is going to hurt a lot. This is going to, we're we're all going to cry. We're going to delay the inevitable. And sometimes we see that today, when you're in love and you can't get off the phone. I mean, I know that's a trivial representation of what went on here, but it's kind of what was going on here. Maybe at an airport where you just wait till the absolutely last possible second. Now, back in the day when I was a kid, high school, college, anybody could go through security and wait at the gate with whoever it was they were saying goodbye to, and security was minimal. You sent your bag to the X-ray machine, you picked it up on the other end, and you kept walking. None of this shoes off, belt off, all that stuff is. Should I make social? No, leave it alone. Things have changed since I was a kid. I don't know if they've changed for the better, but way more security now. Anyways, so you would do that, if you were, you were saying goodbye to your best friend, if you were saying goodbye to your lover, if you were saying goodbye to your husband or wife, you would, the whole family sometime would come and say goodbye to dad. They'd all go through security, then they'd all sit around the gate, and then they'd wait and they'd get the final hug in before they walk down the gangplank, walkway, the whatever that is now, not the not the gangplank. But you switch over to Pirates of Caribbean, yeah, or Caribbean, depending on where you're from. Anyways, and you'd wave goodbye, and then they'd turn the corner, and then you'd stand there at the window right next to the plane and wait for them to back up and maybe catch them. And I remember doing this. I remember always getting a window seat at every possible chance, because I could lean into the window and wave goodbye, and maybe they'd see me, and I'd flap the window for shade up and down so they could find what window I was at, all that kind of stuff. That used to be. So I know it's still trivial as to what's going on here, but that's what I think of when I see this. So they traveled together. Naomi knew eventually she was going to have to say goodbye to these lovely ladies, and she would have to release them. and they would return to their mothers and with all of their stuff. That's you say, well, what, they had all their stuff with them. Yeah, they did, but she assumed they were leaving from the road to go home, to go back to their parents' place, to come back into their mother's care as widows. And as she stated, now again, this could have been a few hours, could have been sunset. I don't know. Naomi, she turns to them and she blesses them for their kindness, both to her and to their husbands. They showed kindness to their husbands by staying with Naomi. They showed kindness to Naomi by staying with Naomi. More than just looking out for themselves, they took care of Naomi. And as widows, they could have just left. They could have just said, you know what, I'm going to go back to my mom's house. But Naomi recognized that they chose to stay with her. And so she's releasing them into what she thinks they should have done or could have done at least, several years ago after their husbands died. She's saying, go back home. Go back home. The Lord will be with you. Get another husband. She kissed them and they all were crying. You can imagine this was, it's intense. They were probably ugly crying. Not a few tears. They were weeping. There was hyperventilation going on. There was all kinds of intense emotions flowing. Nobody wanted to let go of each other. And they were saying, no, we will go back with you. We will go back to your people. We will go back to you. And she's like, no. Like she appreciated the sentiment, the intensity, the love. She honestly must have been a wonderful lady. A mother-in-law like no other. The devotion of Orpah and Ruth was no small thing. And Moab knew about this too. The culture of Moab, especially in the villages where these ladies lived, they all knew that Orpah and Ruth were in love with their mother-in-law. And I can't imagine that their moms weren't also at some level a little taken back by this intensity of the love that their daughters had for their mother-in-law. I once heard a comedian talk about how the son-in-law gets along great with his mother-in-law, generally speaking. And you can joke about son-in-laws and mother-in-laws all you want. But if you try to make too many jokes about a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, like that's not funny. Because those mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws generally do not do well together. Now, I can speak for me personally. I got along great with my mother-in-law. She's no longer with us, but she was a wonderful lady who always treated me well. And as far as I can tell, my daughters-in-law get along really well with my wife. They all have a good relationship with my wife. Not necessarily, they're three different people. So the relationships are three different relationships, but they're all positive. So she had to be a pretty awesome lady, and families and communities knew, not cultures, but communities knew about this thing. So in like I said, in verse 9, she blesses them. She releases them to their next marriage. She shows that kind of kindness and generosity. She wasn't looking to control or demand their time, their loyalty, their faithfulness. She was looking out for their best interest, and that is a sign of love. She's like, you're young enough. You could get another husband. You could have children. You could find comfort and rest in another home. That's not going to happen. And like I said, with me, and in verse 10, they both refuse, and she probably is like, I understand that you have a true desire to stay with me, but they're saying we want to be a part of your life forever. Like, we love you. We loved your sons, but we love you, and we're going to stay with you. Now, Naomi's reasoning again is for their best life. And going home, this is kind of, an intensity there in verse 12, where it says, "Return home, my daughters." And she starts to lay out the reasonings of it. Coming with me, basically, this is not going to work out well for you, because eventually I'm old. I'm going to die. And then you'll be old and you will die, and you will be in Judah, and you will have no husbands, and you will have no children. And like, I appreciate your love, but let me, listen to me. Do what I'm telling you. There's no time for you. There's no time for you to be. I don't understand that. Why did I write that? Oh, verse 13. Sorry. That's what I'm referring to. So she's like, just listen to the logic of this. What are you going to do? Now, by law, often a cultural law within the Hebrew teachings, this is what would happen. If you were a widow and there was an unmarried son, then you would wait for that son to be old enough to become your husband, and he would be obligated to marry you. And she's like, I can't have another child. Like, that's not going to happen. And even if I could today get a husband and get pregnant, are you going to wait for that son to grow up and be old enough to be your husband? Like, you're talking ridiculousness, ladies. So in verse 13, she says, oops, what did I do? Verse 13. I hit a button. Oh, verse 13, halfway through. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me. And that word bitter means harder, literally. Her circumstances in Judah were going to be very difficult. Her position as a widow was going to be more difficult than it would be in Moab. She's like, it's going to be harder for me. I know this. I don't want you to be a part of that. And when other people view me, they're going to see that it's not good for me, that the Lord has, quote, turned against me. My circumstances have been bad. She was really being reasonable. Now, she might have some deep hope in God, but the reality is it's going to be hard. And she views herself as a victim of, quote, God's plan. God did this to me. And the conversation was very passionate, and I imagine went on for a long time. I mean, we get it in a few verses here, but she's pointing out, listen, this is the Lord's hand against me. And they wept aloud, verse 14. They wept aloud again. And that means, again, time. They probably, I picture them sitting at this point. Maybe against the rocks, maybe not. But they're exhausted from the emotion and the passion, the love, the sorrow, the fear of the future. It just goes on and on, the intensity of what they're feeling. But somewhere out of that, Orpah kind of pulls herself together and she kisses her mother-in-law, and she decides to listen to the wisdom and love that Naomi was speaking to her. I don't think Orpah is a bad person by any means. She was stepping into the offer that love was presenting to her. She's not evil. She's not wrong. And remember, freedom of choice is a core value of the kingdom of God. And she left Naomi and Ruth. This had to be incredibly difficult for her. And maybe she expected Ruth to follow her. Maybe she kept looking behind her as she walked away. Is Ruth coming? Is Ruth coming? And when she turns, she sees Ruth just clinging to Naomi. She assumes maybe Ruth is saying goodbye for the same reasons, and that they would be on the road together. Maybe she started walking a little slower, hoping that Ruth would catch up with her. But Ruth is looking at Naomi, and she's like, I'm not leaving. And Naomi says in verse 15, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. And in verse, I imagine that happened kind of when things had settled down a little bit. I just think that this took a long time. Orpah's now out of sight. Ruth has stopped crying. Naomi looks at her and says, look it, I love you. It's time for you to leave. Your family, your religion, they're all back there. Go back with family. There's nothing in my land that waits for you. Now in verse 16 and 17, right? This is the go-to passage. This is the one, that is read at the weddings. This is the one that is tattooed on people's backs or arms or chest or wherever. This is the one that's hangs in the church. What are the names of those front the foyer, the lobby, the narthex, the lanai? I don't know, man. There's so many names for that. Vestibule. Thank you, Bob. That one's old school. The vestibule. Crazy. All churches had them back in the day. You walked in and there was like this little entrance area. And that's where the pastor always stood at the end of the service. He'd walk down the aisle and he'd stand there and shake everybody's hand. Who wanted to shake his hand on the way out? Yeah. Anyways, things have changed. All right. Moving on. Verse 16. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. This is famous for a reason. This is intense on every level. Every aspect of the language of this is intense. There is so much kingdom in these verses. There's so much love, devotion, freedom, hope, commitment to God, to his ways. It's really a covenant conversation. She's like, this is not when I'm in essence, when I'm married your husband, I made a covenant with him. It wasn't out of convenience. It wasn't out of lust. It wasn't out of some sort of contract that we needed to make. It was a covenant, and I was serious about it. It doesn't, again, this is not to belittle Orpah or to make her choice somehow lesser, the lesser of two things. But what Ruth did, like I said, is like so kingdom. It's so covenant. It's so love. And it was so intense that in verse 18, it's like when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging. So with this kind of vow that was made, this renewal of a covenant, I think in essence, Ruth was saying, listen, I covenanted with your son, my husband. And for me, that meant the whole family. I am going to renew the covenant with you. And a lot of people, again, make these verses part of their vows in their marriages. So I would imagine Ruth looks at her and realizes, all right, I can't make you go back. And what you're committing to, you're smart enough to know what you're committing to. And the conversation now shifts from please go back to your people to what life is like as poor widows in Bethlehem. And I'm sure Naomi started to talk about places that they would go when they arrived. Like she probably was thinking, okay, I know this place outside of town. It's where all the widows stay. We'll go there first. We'll let people know I'm in town. My relatives are going to want to know that I'm there. They should start taking care of us, providing for us. It is their responsibility. But to be fair, they're pretty mad at me, or could be mad at me and offended that we left during a famine. We shouldn't have left during the famine. My husband was very sick. That's my conjecture. I don't know that for sure. And we stayed, and now it was, quite obvious that the Lord was starting to bless our land again, and now I'm coming back. So some of them could be a little put out by the fact that I've arrived back home and want them to take care of me. But that's where I imagine the conversation started to shift. And so verse 19, so the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem, and they arrived at Bethlehem. The whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? So they come to to Bethlehem, which is anywhere from 7 to 10 day walk from where they were, which is about 50 miles. And the word spread really quickly. I would imagine as we were getting close to the town, there were people on the road that were passing them that, looked at her and said, hey, whatever the greeting would be, shalom. She said shalom. And maybe somebody even has said, hey, what are you girls doing in town? Oh, I lived here. I left here about 10 years ago. My name is Naomi. And she'd give the last name, and I was married to Elimelech, and they would be like, oh, the judge. Oh, like, so, yes, word spread quickly. When she left so rich. She was so full. She had a husband. She had 2 sons. They had plenty of money. And she's returning with nothing. She has no money. She has no sons, and she has a foreigner for her daughter-in-law. In verse 20, she's like, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very difficult, very hard, very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. So she changes her name because everything she was when she left is over as far as she's concerned, right? She changed her name to Mara, which is bitter water in the desert. If you remember that story, that's from way back in season 3 in Exodus. She's like, I'm bitter water. She gives God absolute credit for all of her pain and loss. To be fair, Mara is also the place where God showed up and made it sweet. So there is hope in her name. I know a lot of people, and I don't blame them, like you just turn it into only the negative, but given the beauty and amazingness of Naomi's character and the rest of the story, I wonder if she chose the word Mara because she still had hope that God could show up and turn it into something sweet. I think she did. I think she did, but I am ridiculously optimistic, but I am full of hope and joy. So I think she was acknowledging to the people around her, like, listen, my whole life has changed. Everything about my circumstances looks bad. The only family member I have isn't even part of the tribes. She's a Moabitess. Call me Mara. And within that name, I think those who heard it were like, well, I get it. She is bitter. Her life is hard, but there's hope. I don't know. I think Naomi's character is one that is true. And so you can argue with me if you want. I'm not gonna push back that hard on it. But I like hope. And I think these stories are filled with hope. And so that's where I see it. They arrive as the harvest of barley begins. And that was Naomi's plan. She knows the laws of Moses and how it requires the care of widows. Now, the town people didn't do much, right? No relative took her in. No one came by and said, "Hey, let me provide some sort of income for you." They all relied on the law. And that's what happens, right? When you rely on the law, you lose the heart of the kingdom. You lose the heart of God. Jesus said this quite clearly in the New Testament. Like, you obey the law, but you've missed the heart of it. The law says, well, we'll leave some of the harvest out for the widows to glean, and they can survive on what we leave behind. That's what the law says. But the law was like, that's there so that you understand how the principle is that everyone should be leaving things for those that are poor, for the widows, etc. That's the goal, is to set up the principle of behavior, the culture of the kingdom. But when you just obey the law, then you can pass that off to the law and say, well, the law will take care of them. We don't have to. I believe this is so well exampled here in America. I think the church in general, I'm not condemning everybody and calling them all horrible, but in general, the church abdicated their responsibility of caring for the poor, the widow, the injured, the handicapped. We turned it over to the law. We let the laws be written, and we're like, well, there's welfare, well, there's Medicare, well, there's the EBT cards or whatever for food. Like, I don't need to give anything. I don't need to find somebody who's in need and say, hey, I'm going to bring you some things. I'm going to bring you some clothes. I'm going to bring you some food. When I have some extra money, I'm going to, try and take care of you. I want to help you live life better if I can. And we'll do what we can. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It does. I know wonderful people that do this, and I know wonderful people that would love to do more if they had the resources to do it. So I'm not condemning. I'm just throwing out the example. And I think some of that has to do with, some churches are like, well, we have a food pantry, we have a clothing store, we have lots of things for the poor. Awesome. I think that's awesome. And I think we should. But the individuals then advocate their individual responsibility to the church. It's like, well, I give my money to the church. I also get my tax write-off, which is another whole 501c3 conversation that we can have. But people are like, I give my extra clothes to the church. I give my extra food to the church. I don't need to know somebody who's poor. I don't need to reach out and build relationship with somebody who is in need. I can just give to some middleman and feel good about myself. It's one of the criticisms of a lot of these mission trips, right? It's like we show up for 10 days or 2 weeks, we build a building, and we leave. There's no real relationship, long-term interaction. There's no kingdom relational connection. It's just do a task, call it a day. It's not the way of the kingdom. And I think that the people in Bethlehem, they all know that Naomi has returned. She gives her name, and I believe she gives her name with an article of hope. And the people are like, hey, barley harvest is starting. You'll be fine. And they leave her alone with the other widows. And we'll pick up there next week on the Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.